Hello, this is Tech Time Today. I am just going to wait for a minute before doing the official start here because it takes like 30 seconds or so to fire up all the different streams. I'm using a software called Riverside, which I would definitely recommend, like using a lot. I've used different video recording and conferencing software, podcasting software before, and Riverside's pretty good. It's definitely one of the better ones. And you can connect it up to a bunch of other social apps. So not just YouTube, Twitter, Twitch. I noticed LinkedIn. I think they just added that. Actually, I gotta look into that because I couldn't get that added, but that seems interesting too to do it that way. And so I'm gonna add all those. And today I'm gonna be doing a live stream, but this is to kind of record raw content that I will use for more edited video about this particular topic. So let's get started and we'll go from there. Hello and welcome to Tech Time Today. I am your host, Jeff Welpley, and in this episode, we're going to be talking about the free web economy. This is something that has existed for 25 years now, since the internet boom, and probably more than 25 years, but really the past 25 years has seen a huge growth in the fundamentals of a free web economy between three main parties that I'm going to get into. And I'm going to talk about why this economy of free content and free services is dying right now, is really hurting in different ways. And we'll talk a little bit about what we can do about it. But most of the what we can do about it, I'm actually going to do in a separate video because that is a whole huge topic that we're going to spend a lot of time on as well. In this video, I want to talk about the problem itself. And this is something that I don't think is going to be surprising to people, but hopefully I can explain it in a way that is simple and can make sense and can create some common language among us so that we're all kind of understanding where the specific issue is with the what has broken the free web economy. I mean, spoiler alert, it is related to AI. And then by understanding what is actually happening and kind of being on the same page with that, with what the problem is, then I think we can have like a pretty good discussion about what are some potential solutions. So I'm going to share my screen, and I did not spend, okay, I usually, for any type of presentations, spend a crazy long period of time on visuals. When I'm doing a conference talk, for example, I will spend literally months on just 20 minutes of slides because I want to get everything perfect and go over it again and again. I did not do that for this one. I just very quickly, I had an idea already of what I wanted to talk about, and I very quickly, as you will see, put it together. So give me a little bit of break on the visuals here, but hopefully they will make sense. So give me a second here to get this up. Ah, that's how I wanted to. Okay. So back in December, so December 2024, I gave a presentation on SEO in 2025, and all the crazy changes going on in the world of SEO. And one of the central things I talked about in that talk was this concept of the magic SEO triangle, of this relationship between this of a triangle of relationships between the user, the website and any website or web app or web provider and search engines. It was for what we're talking about today. It is a version of this because we're going to talk about it purely from the side of economics. The SEO one I talked about needs of like what this kind of mutual needs were among the three parties in this triangle. For the free web economy, I'm going to talk about how these three kind of parties, what are the economic incentives, the values given to and from each of them, and the way that it's been, again, for at least 25 years now. So in order for a good economic system to exist, which has existed for a long time here, there has to be value going both ways. It can't just be a one way, because then the other party won't survive, or there'll be no economic incentive to give back. So it's healthy when there is value going each way. So let's talk about what is the actual value, what is the economics of these relationships. And so I mean, some of this is super obvious, right? So between a user and a website or web app or whatever you want to call it, the user has a problem, and in theory, a application is the answer, the solution to that problem. Like, it is providing one, well, could be more, but like, for the purposes of what we're discussing, let's say the user has one specific problem and the web app is that one specific good answer or solution to that problem. So the user is getting value from the website by solving whatever their problem or question is, right? So that's obvious. And the website, I use the term for our business, and it's kind of maybe unsavory term, but just eyeballs. So when you have somebody looking, you have a user who is viewing something that you're providing, you can turn that into money in many different ways. So we're not going to get into all the different ways. I mean, that's sort of irrelevant, but it's just to know that in theory, when a user is visiting an actual human, not a bot, when an actual human is navigating through your website, you have the opportunity to convert their eyeballs, convert them viewing your website into money in many different ways. Ads, get them to sign up for a newsletter, which then get them to eventually sign up for a subscription, yada, 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 whatever. But that's a very clear back and forth of value, right? So I'm assuming everybody it should be pretty easy to understand that. For between search engines and users, it's also relatively straightforward that it's one thing if a user has one specific problem and one specific website gives that one specific solution, but a user will visit, have many, many, many different problems and many different questions through the day. I mean, you as a user, the person who is listening to what I'm saying right now, I'm sure you go through this yourself. That throughout the day, you have many questions, many issues that you use search engines or now AI, which we're going to talk about in a second. But it's helpful to have just one user interface, one entry point to ask that. That provides the value. There is having that one, even if that place then sends you off someplace else, which is what traditionally search engines have done. There's a lot of value to that. So I'll keep going back to the search engine, keep going back to the search engine, because I know that it will eventually give me the answer, even if then it sends me somewhere else. And the value that the users give to the search engines obviously are, again, eyeballs. And once again, that can be converted to money through ads, selling user behavior data, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So once again, value exchange all makes sense. Now, the value between search engines and the websites. So this is something that was established pretty early on from Google. I mean, even earlier search engines, but definitely Google really helped with this. Is that they take from the websites the search engines, especially, okay, forget about, we'll get into what's happening today, but just put your mind back to 2000, the year 2000, to 2005, when the search engine didn't actually know how to give answer by itself, like in a box without isolation, without any help from any of the other information and websites on the internet. Google couldn't actually give the user that one stop answer to everything. They needed to crawl the web. They needed to gather all that, and then they were capable of providing those answers. So the websites give them all the capability of giving those answers to the user, the possibility of it. So the websites, all the millions and billions of different websites out there, are what give search engines their value, right? And in exchange, search engines give users back to website. Again, let's hold off on a second for what's happening right now. But traditionally, especially early 2000s, the search engines wouldn't have any, like, the actual solution. They wouldn't actually have the answer themselves. They would just have a link to send the user to the website, and then the user would get their value there. And so search engines are a great way of acquiring users for the website. So you have this mutually beneficial economy. And this is where the free internet was built. So, like, websites were able to build things and provide free content and free services, free, like, applications and all sorts of stuff for free, because of this specific setup, because they knew they could eventually get users through search engines, through these sort of set of relationships. So this is the core of the free economy, the web economy, which is free and not you know the pay to play type stuff. So hopefully that makes sense. Okay, now how does this change once the most recent year, 2 years, as generative AI both creeps into the search engine itself, to Google and other search engines, and other user interfaces like OpenAI's ChatGPT and Claude and all the other different interfaces, entry points for AI. How does that change the thing? So I'll keep them all in one box, because fundamentally, even though they're different, they still are trying to be the same thing that provides the same value of that one UI for any question, problem, to the user, right? And the thing that's different here is that when you talk about these AI interfaces, so let's forget about Google for a second and just talk about ChatGPT or even Gemini, Google's Gemini by itself. The thing is, they don't send users to the website. Everything else exists, but they don't have this line, or it's hardly there, very barely there, of actually sending users to the website. But everything else is in place. And this setup is what fundamentally breaks this economy that has existed for such a long period, been so prosperous in so many ways. And you might say that the reason why, like, the pessimist, or the someone who is looking at these generative AI interfaces and search engines and Google in a sort of negative way, might think like, oh, it's just all about money. They're just trying to grab, it's a money grab or whatever. But I actually don't think it's as simple as that. I mean, sure, it is true that if you keep all of the users and you don't send them anywhere, then yes, you can make more money in the short term. We're going to talk about why not in the long term in a second. But I don't think it's as simple as that. I don't think it's an evil thing that Google and others are trying to do. I think it's actually more so a byproduct of what AI is all about. That and actually the ultimate version of what this original vision for search engines was, like providing that one UI for any question and problem. Even before generative AI stuff was available over the past 2-3 years, Google has had instant answers, has had other versions of providing the thing to users without sending them to the website. They've tried it out over the years in a number of ways because, well, some of it's for money reasons, but some of it is because of the original purpose of giving the best possible user experience to the user who comes to them with questions or problems. And in a theoretical world, if you are talking to an AI, what is the forget about how things exist today, just in a theoretical AI that's like a super intelligence, perfect, AI, the best possible user experience is probably that you ask the question and it gives you an answer, that you have a problem and it gives you a solution. It is the best possible experience is not that I'm talking to Jarvis and Jarvis starts sending me to random websites that I've never seen before to try to like figure out what's going on there. That's probably not doesn't make sense in like the in the ultimate version or whatever. So I get what they're trying to do, but that doesn't change the fact that this fundamentally breaks this system in a way that has not been fully understood, not hasn't been felt yet. It has been felt in some ways, but not fully yet. Because so if we go back to all these in place, right? And let's say okay, we've gotten to this stage one. So this is where we're at in time wise, where the newer just let's say generative AI, fully interfaces have almost completely, practically, limited sending any users to websites, but they still are taking all of the content. They're taking, and they aren't taking functionality. So that is a different thing. We'll maybe talk about that a lot more when we talk about solutions. But they're taking a lot of it in, but they aren't sending the users back, right? And once you have that, the website or some websites in particular that heavily rely on search engine traffic, they lose their eyeballs. Now you can argue that if it's providing a lot of value, they should be able to get users through other means, not just search engines, yada yada. Okay, sure. But we're talking about at the larger scale of just this free web economy, like these millions of different people out there that are creating content websites and other sites of value that provide value and drive a lot of the knowledge these within these AIs are driven by all these people that are creating all this stuff out there, and they do depend on, up until now, on search engines giving them traffic, right? And so if they don't have that, no eyeballs, okay, so then eventually the website can't function anymore because they aren't getting the money, they aren't getting what they need. And you are starting to see some of this already. So like up until now, this is where we have seen already many sites out there. You can definitely, if you aren't aware, there's many different articles talking about the dramatic changes over the past couple of years, and a lot of like especially smaller content creators that have basically gone out of business. And then if you extrapolate that and it keeps on going enough time, then a lot of the content, the human driven content, I'm not talking about, of course, there's websites that are just have junk and low value, but I'm talking about that there is legitimately out there a lot of good, human driven, creative, content and services, right? But if they aren't going to be able to get value, they either have to find ways to charge users directly, use other channels, etc. But the key thing I'm driving at is like under this system that had been working before, it does not work, and even though today, a lot of the generative AI, knowledge bases, the knowledge that drives the AI models, and search engines are essentially an AI model as well. That it'll start losing some of that high quality content that is out there, and then this is I don't think this is necessarily happened yet, or but actually some people would argue that it has. Where the Yeah, actually there would be a lot of people that argue that this has already started to happen too. Is that the quality and the ability of these central user interfaces to solve the person's question or problem starts to dry up. Now, I think this is where, like, yes, to some degree it does, but I actually think overall in the scale of things, they have that's more to do with the ability of the model to process the information, not because it doesn't have that information. It has, for the large part, there's a lot of the AI models that have pulled in all this free content, and have what is needed still because it is freely available out there. But I'm talking about down the road, it may not be as much, and then they run into serious problems because you without that stream of new creative content, the quality of these generative AI interfaces just are gonna have a ceiling, are gonna have a limit that, it's going to be an issue where then eventually, and this is what a lot of the bigger companies should worry about, OpenAI and Google and everyone else, that then that will affect their bottom line when they don't have the quality. So this is something that does, that they can't, for right now it works to not send users, um, because you know there still is people creating quality content from sort of the remnants of the old system that's still living on to some degree, but it's not going to be that way forever. And there is a real risk to this. Now, if I had to boil it down, really what we is the way to, like, think about this is, how can I'm short, by the way. I'm fully understand that the term AI is not necessarily the best one for encapsulating, you know, all the different variety of technologies that are out there. So, but I don't want to spend forever like listing out, specific things and with the way they work. So when I say I mean, modern search engines, generative AI, LLMs, all different versions of technologies that scrape content from free content from the internet, and then train machine learning models based off of them, and then use that in a way to provide an interface to users for some version of generative AI or other, um, way of providing intelligence to users. So it's pretty broad, but how can that quote unquote AI provide value back to content creators and app providers without sending users? Now, right off the bat, I know that because I've spoken to so many individual, like small, medium-sized content creators out there, and I think the common mindset now is still like, well, they should. Why would you think that we have to assume that they can't send us users? I mean, that's the way it's always been working. Why can't, in Gemini, there still can be like links to websites? So, like, for example, you do see this on there, and it is something that has been added, that in different ways. This is one of the versions in Gemini, where you ask a question and then it gives you sources, and you can click on the source to go to the website if you wanted to. The problem with this, and the reason why I'm saying that we have to figure out something different for the new economy, the sort of free web economy 2.0, we got to figure out something different, because this, even though, okay, it's sort of good to see the sources in some degrees, how many people I'm sure a lot of you guys watching have, at the very least, tested out some of these different generative AI user interfaces. How many times have you clicked on one of these sources links? I gotta imagine that for most people, it's zero or close to zero. And the reason is because it's antithetical to how AI is supposed to function, how generative AI is supposed to function. It's supposed to, or in its ideal form, actually give you the answer. It's not it's not the same thing as a search engine. It just isn't. It's not something where you just have a link and you have to go to the other website to get your answer. It should be that it has your answer, and then you can interact with it. You can ask it more questions. You can go like a whole back and forth. That's the whole point, right? So any sort of user experience where users, more than like a very small number of users, are actually getting routed to a completely different website, would actually mean that there's something wrong with the AI, if that makes sense. So it is the value cannot be the same. The value from the free web economy 1.0 was search engines sending users to websites. It just can't be that for the web economy 2.0. So what is what is it? What is that value? Because once you have that, the other parts can still remain the same, but we have to figure out how to get the value from these different AI user interfaces that are intended to be the one-stop shop for users to providers. And it's just okay. And that's where I really want to get into it in a separate video, but I'll sort of tease it a little bit, that there is a bunch of different approaches that you could take. And the reason why I created this video, the reason why I'm thinking about it, I'm going to Google I/O next week. I know I'm going to be talking to a lot of other Googlers and other web and tech experts there. And I think this is something that we all have to like get on board with and solve together. Like, I don't think it's going to be one company or one person that comes up with the solution per se. But I do think that it's one of those like kind of almost like open source community based things that if there's a good idea, like if someone comes up with a good idea that is kind of shared by the community, I do think that it can grow over time and be something that if it's seen as a mutually beneficial thing, I think that the different companies involved will latch onto it eventually because it is mutually beneficial. Like it is like in their best interest to figure out a good way to provide value back so that they continue to get the value from all these different providers. And we haven't talked about, okay, there's like so many topics for the next video. When it comes to like, it's one thing with content, so stuff that can be scraped and read over the internet. Obviously, within AI interface right now, it doesn't that much have the ability to use app functionality. That is something that with like MCP and some other things, I mean, you can also, sometimes you could set up some of these AI interfaces to make API calls and that type of thing. But okay, in theory, like that's one thing of being able to okay, now it's not just content, it's also app functionality. It's available there. But then whatever, that doubles the problem because you have more stuff that's available in these generative AIs, which is great. You can just tell Gemini to just book the flight for you, right? And it will underneath the scenes use some other provider to do that. And with booking a flight, that's maybe not the best example for the free thing because there's obviously money exchange there. So like, better thing would be like, okay, not to plug my own company, but like at Human, we have a telephony service where we assist users, provide kind of a smartphone for calling companies that gives you information on how to deal with customer service issues and kind of work on your behalf. Navigate through the IVR quicker, get to a human, so that you can solve your problem quicker and that type of thing. And in theory, you could have Gemini call out to our app functionality for making that call and connecting user, but the way we make money is through ads by someone seeing the ads on our website when they are making that call, and we provide that service for free, right? So if that functionality occurs through Gemini, that's all well and good, but how would we get any value out of that, right? Now, you could think of all sorts of different ways of rev share, of like different ways that they have to like actually explicitly pay money to providers when they use their functionality or show their content. That is a solution, and we'll get into that. It can be tricky. There could be like ones that aren't directly isn't directly a money exchange, that it's the value is indirect, like you gain more access to users. Like if somebody uses our app functionality, then maybe the agreed upon protocol that doesn't exist yet, that this is what I'm talking about, like something that we all have to work on and think about. Maybe the provider gets some additional level access to those users so that they can follow up with them and whatever. I don't know. There's a couple of different ways. I'm still like trying to think of all the different things to lay out there myself, and I don't know what the right answer is. And I'll again get into that a lot more in the next episode. But I wanted to, in this video, lay out the problem, make sure that it's very clear. And I hope that, I would think that most people who see this, who kind of understand how the web has worked, over these past decades, can see that it is something that is broken, and it's an issue right now already, but it's going to be a really big issue if we don't figure out something, a solution for going forward. So hopefully that makes sense. I'd love to hear your comments and ideas, down below. Like I said, if you're watching this live stream, I will try to create a more like tighter, shorter video version of this, so that hopefully that you could share around and that type of thing. But definitely let me know. And if you're going to Google I/O, I'd love to see and chat about this topic next week. So thanks for watching, and I will see you again next time on Tech Time Today.